Hi, everybody. My name is Maureen Hahn. I'm the President and CEO of the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work, CCRW. I'm also a steering committee member for the Disability and Work in Canada initiative. And it is my great pleasure and honest honor to introduce you to your moderator for today's session, which is Disability Confidence, a Business Journey in Accessible Workplaces. So your moderator today is Megan Kelly. Megan is the National Manager for Business Development at CCRW. And I'm going to give it over to you, Megan. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for moderating the panel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maureen. And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As Maureen said, my name is Megan Kelly, and I am the National Manager of Business Development at the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman with shoulder length, light brown hair. I'm wearing round wire-framed glasses and a black turtleneck. I'm sitting in front of a partially beige background that has a city view. So thank you so much for joining us for this session. As Maureen noted, the title of this session is Disability Confidence, a Business Journey in Accessible Workplaces. And I just wanted to take a moment to note again the accessibility features that we're utilizing on Zoom. There is ASL interpretation as well as closed captioning. If you'd like to turn the closed captioning on, you can do so at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So our panel discussion today will provide a storytelling opportunity for the wonderful businesses and organizations that are here with us to really share the action and learning-based journey they have committed to in becoming disability confident and creating workplaces and workspaces that are truly accessible. In the current landscape, employers, businesses, organizations recognize the need for both attracting and retaining talent, for measuring success, and also for future planning. It's really about the importance of having a balanced approach and an acknowledgement that concurrent layers of accessible and inclusive actions are the way to success. The concept of disability confidence encourages businesses to be fully confident, which means going beyond compliance and legal requirements in all areas pertaining to disability to enhance accessibility and inclusivity. Disability confidence is a thoughtful approach that encourages businesses to make progress on their disability inclusive journey. And sharing their journey with us today on our panel are Tammy Morris, Network Leader, Neurodiversity Centers of Excellence at EY Canada, Mark Czapewski, Vice President of Program Development at Electricity Human Resources Canada, Jennifer Popke, who is the Diversity and Inclusion Talent Partner, Diversity and Inclusion at TD Bank, as well as her colleague, Bert Floyd, Senior IT Manager, Assistive Technologies, TD Bank Group. So with that, I'm going to pass the honor over to our wonderful panel, and we're going to start with Jennifer Popke. Jennifer, please introduce yourself and share your journey with us.
Certainly. Thank you so much. Really, really happy to be here and appreciate the people sharing their time with us to be part of this conference. It's fantastic. I've been able to beat to 4, I think, at this point, or three, I know, and it's been growing, and it's been great to see this growing community looking at disability and work. So again, my name is Jennifer Popke. I work with TD Bank, and my role essentially is I am looking for great talent who happen to have disabilities who are looking to grow their careers at TD. And my apologies to the interpreter for this. I realized I hadn't given a vision at world description first. I'm a white woman. I have longer light brown hair thanks to hair products. I'm wearing a green sweater with a small necklace. I'm sitting in a gaming chair because it's a nice version of an ergo chair. And I've got a gray background behind me, very plain by design, because I'm also a sign language interpreter. So back into work mode. I've been with the bank 15 years. I've been in the PWD space for over 20. Qualified sign language interpreter, yes. Had been part of accessibility advisory committees. And I have a son who's on the spectrum. I live with a disability myself, an invisible one. And I really love to have the job that I do because I get to meet so many fantastic candidates who have so much to contribute and help us build better products and services because they're coming to the table to help us make it stronger the first time. So I get to meet people from all areas, all interests, all job levels, and all across the country. I can go on about me, what I can tell more later, but if it's all right, I would love to move over to Bert Floyd because I think he's got a really interesting story to share for us about TD's journey and how we've become more disability confident because his role and his team actually started even before mine, if that's all right.
Absolutely, Jennifer. And thank you so much for noting all the important work that you do in attracting and meeting candidates for TD Bank and the impact that they have with the organization. So we will.
And I should say, I just got 2 hires this week from CCRW agency. So yeah, it is great. So yes, it's really happening.
Yeah.
My apologies. I'll let you go over.
No, that's great. And to your point, I will pass it over to your colleague, Bert Floyd, to talk about, the work that he's doing at TD Bank, but also some of the really innovative ways you've implemented disability confident processes there. So Bert, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Megan. And thanks, Jen. I am Bert Floyd. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a middle-aged white man with kind of darker brown hair that's quickly turning gray. And I'm wearing a business suit, which is kind of fun. It's great to have an excuse not to wear my hoodie and track pants that I normally wear to work every day. And behind me is just a gray wall. I'm not a sign language interpreter, but this is my basement. So, but I'm thrilled to be here. So thank you. My journey really started, I'm an old technology guy. I worked at the help desk. I was managing a technology team, and TD had a strong diversity program and put a push on to hire more persons with disabilities. And they hired a gentleman who was blind. And this is about 15, 16 years ago. And I got pulled in because they were asking for some technology that nobody in the bank understood. They wanted a screen reader, they wanted a braille display, a scanner with OCR software. We didn't have these things. The bank's a very high security environment, so we can't just install software. It has to be tested, security and analysis done, packaged, pushed out to PCs. And unfortunately, it took us about 3 months to figure out how to make all of this work in our high security environment. And it wasn't a great experience. And so that was the genesis of what we ended up calling the assistive technologies team. We worked with a lot of our community partners, some of the post-secondary education groups to determine what are a lot of the common assistive technologies being used in the work environment or the school environment. And we wanted to source those things, bring them into the bank, and come up with a set of standards that we pre-certified. So we already worked with our security team. We've already packaged the software, the drivers, and we got everything working. So we built an assistive technology lab, brought in all this great technology, narrowed down to a set of standards that we wanted to work with, and got them all working. And the goal, and we were successful, it took us about a year, was to actually stock and maintain an inventory of equipment and software so that when we hired someone, they'd receive their assistive technologies just as fast as they received their laptop. So welcome to the bank, here's your laptop, your phone, your assistive technology. And so that was a huge win. And so it took us about a year. The interesting thing though was people started knocking on the door wondering what's going on in there. That's kind of a really wild looking keyboard. Can we learn more about that? What are you doing? And so we'd run little information sessions for people on our floor. And they'd tell 2 friends who also told 2 friends, and soon we were being invited to come to team meetings or town hall sessions to talk about the work we were doing. People found it fascinating. So we actually opened up another lab. It was far tidier, and turned it into an education, kind of a showcase where we could bring people in to learn about the technology. learn about all of the things that TD is making available to our colleagues, and also to help educate our executives and the managers, the people that do the hiring, to give them the confidence that if they hired a person with disability, there's a team and all this technology here to help back them up and put people to work so that they can focus on abilities, not their disabilities. Fast forward a few years later, we started working on IT accessibilities, work with our vendors and our internal tech teams to help them make systems that are accessible so they play nice with assistive technology, or so people can natively access them. And more recently, we've been focused on education and awareness. There's an awful lot of assistive technology that's now built into desktops, and things that used to cost thousands of dollars are now built. And we want people to be aware of that, so they can access those tools, that they can self-accommodate. And we've still got an assistive technology and workplace accommodation team if they need support beyond that. And most recently, we're really focused on everybody else. We want to make sure that TD's got a very inclusive workplace. So we've got a strong push on an education program now about creating accessible documents. Here's how. How to host accessible meetings, and really it's not just about focusing on the person with disabilities. Everybody has a role to play in creating a diverse and inclusive workplace, and that's really our current focus. We still do all the technology fun stuff, but we really want to educate everyone that we've all got a role to play here.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Bert. A couple of the points that I really appreciate you highlighting are sort of through that lens of education, and not only about the products themselves and the assistive technologies, but really about that internal knowledge exchange. So, everyone at TD knows the process, knows what you're doing, and has access to that. So I think that's really key. So thank you for sharing those elements. We really appreciate it. And next, to share their journey, sorry, my computer fell, technical difficulties. To share their journey is Tammy Morris from EY. Take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Megan. So happy to be here. So my pronouns are she and her. I'm a mid-career white woman with shoulder-length brownish hair and a black turtleneck. So in my role as neurodiversity network leader for EY Canada, I spend my time focused, aligned with three really rewarding pillars of work. So at first, internally to the firm to improve inclusion and accessibility for employees in what we call our core business services. So with HR, marketing, learning, and development. I work among a team of consultants. We sit in the consulting service line at EY. And so along with our people advisory services, help our clients to ramp up their own DEI or culture transformation efforts as well. And then finally, I oversee a team of consultants, largely technology and business development focused, who happen to identify as neurodivergent and have leveraged our inclusive hiring methodology and support. So that's what I do at EY. I love everybody's background stories. By background, I have a windy career path myself. I'm a speech language pathologist by training, but I transitioned to advocacy and disability employment about 15 years ago. And at the time, working in healthcare and nonprofit, and so that was my story. I was, running a healthcare facility for people with disabilities, and far too frequently, as our adults would come back in, having graduated, knowing they'd graduated from high school, college, university, and asking, what are you doing now? And the answer was almost, unanimously nothing. And so we started a hiring initiative within the healthcare system that, we grew to be really proud of across medical records and social work and maintenance and many positions. But it took about a year to get that off the ground in a facility, the most accessible facility with all of the specialists to help and accommodate and understand disability. Because of all of the onboarding modules that would take some people with intellectual disabilities months to complete on their own, or band-aiding CPR certifications for people that were double amputees or in power wheelchairs. And so we took a year. We had to create an adapted CPR course. We had to redo onboarding modules. It took a lot. And so that really brought me to, if it takes us this long, right, what are other employers doing? And so through some of that advocacy work, learned really they weren't, right, because there were a lot to go through. So I just came back. I spent a lot of my career in the US, came back to join EY Canada 2 years ago and to help launch the Neurodiversity Center of Excellence for Canada. So we have a team across Toronto, Vancouver, and Halifax, and hiring in Montreal right now. But and in honest, and I know this is a large company panel. What I can say is, there are advantages and disadvantages. So our leader for neurodiversity at EY Canada has a personal connection and was interested. He was our digital transformation leader and wanted to, as we were looking for women in technology and newcomers to Canada, wanted to tap into this talent pool and wasn't even aware that there was a program, right? And so EY launched about 7 years ago a model in the US that we share some principles around, and is now sort of a global global tenets that we follow as well. So I'll pass off back to you, Megan, I think.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tammy. I think one of the really interesting points that you've made is around that component of time. And it really is a journey. And, the expectation isn't that you're going to see immediate change or change overnight, but it's that measured impact over time when there's commitment, buy-in from the top. And to some of Bert's earlier point, that internal knowledge of those who are participating in the process. So thank you for sharing the journey of yourself, but also of EY. And now our last panelist, and certainly not the least, Mr. Mark Czapewski from Electricity Human Resources Canada. Mark, take it away.
Thanks, Megan, and thanks to CCRW and the panelists for having me here. It's a real pleasure. So my name is Mark Czapewski. I am VP of Program Development at Electricity Human Resources Canada. I'm calling in from our head office in Ottawa, which is on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. I am well, I used to like to say early career, but mid-career white male. And I also used to say I had a high forehead line, but it is increasingly male pattern baldness. I have a dark gray jacket on, light blue shirt. I apparently have to work on my background because it's more complicated to describe. There is an EHRC logo with a black male in a construction vest and a city skyline underneath him. And then on my right is a 2 degrees in the background and a blue and white wall. Something I will work on for a future presentation. I have the distinct pleasure of having, my journey actually starts with my kids. One is 3, one is 7, both little boys, both on the autism spectrum. They sort of are my passion in life and are sort of the reason that I do what I do every day. I have the pleasure of working for Electricity Human Resources Canada, who, while not solely focused on disability inclusion, has taken a really forward-thinking role into the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly of persons with a disability. On that note, EHRC represents a labor force of 107,000 people in Canada. That is a workforce that will grow and is growing as we increasingly decarbonize our economy in Canada. And at a time when the labor market in Canada is particularly tight, so we don't have enough people to fill the roles that are available. And one of the things I like in tight labor markets is employers tend to get more innovative in the things that they do in order to find people to fill the roles that they have open. And so I think it's a prime opportunity for persons with a disability to engage with this particular sector, which is high paying and has good benefits overall. Some of the areas that we've worked at Electricity Human Resources Canada that I sort of see as a bit of a leadership role in this space. So we work with employers from across Canada. Our leadership accord on diversity, equity, and inclusion which not only commits organizations to being more inclusive, but also ensures that they benchmark themselves. So in year one, how are we doing, including persons with a disability? And by year two, how have we improved? And set concrete targets for improvement over that period of time. And then continually every 2 years, how have we improved as we move along? We've also developed a number of HR best practice toolkits for inclusion. So Illuminate Opportunity is one such toolkit. It includes training resources, videos, best practice documentation. And specifically, we've developed the Disability to Inclusion Toolkit, which includes case studies and stories of what our employers in this industry have done, such as Hydro Ottawa, BC Hydro, Nalcor. I have now Newfoundland Hydro. I keep forgetting they changed their name. Organizations like that. And the other thing that we've done as an organization is all of the initiatives that we undertake now, all of the programs, whether it's a wage subsidy program that's hiring youth or another program that's focused on improving access to employment for students while they're still studying, is we take a DEI lens to it and we set specific targets to ensure that our employers are hiring persons with a disability as a component of the program. So everything we do has a DEI lens applied to it, or a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens applied to it. All that to say, well, we do a lot in this space. I don't want to take too much time so that we can get into the Q&A. So thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Mark. A couple of really great points that you brought up around, measuring that impact and, having a plan, but also that you're supporting, the employers within your sector to implement change by having those tools available to them to use, but also, ensuring that there is commitment based on, having those targets as a measuring point for people to go beyond. So as moderator, I do have a couple of questions I'd like to pose to the panel, and then we'll open it up to the lovely audience to participate through the Q&A chat option. So my first question is, business to business knowledge exchange has so much power to inspire change. What are some ways, other than participating in amazing panel discussions such as this, that you can share your best or promising practices that you're implementing with other businesses and organizations? And I'd like to start with Jennifer Popke, if you would be so kind to start us off with an answer to that question.
Sure. Well, we've done a couple of things. One, I'm a big person for transparency. So let's share the wins, yes, but let's also share the opportunities for growth, to see where we can get better, because we know the intent is to kind of raise the boat for everyone, right? So for example, with being in a bank, there's somebody, the roles will be slightly different, but there's a peer that's similar to my role across the big 5 banks. And it can take different forms, but I was able to coordinate an interbank committee where we can get together a few times a year and just talk about how are things going, what are the challenges that we're all experiencing. We don't share anything that's proprietary, but we'll each find some similarities in our roles. And because we're all federally regulated, we all have larger organizations, we're kind of sharing like for like. And we've got a few opportunities that way. And it's a great thing, frankly, if I'm finding out that another bank is doing something great, I have more ammunition, frankly, to go to my leadership and to say, did you hear what they're doing? Because we all tend to be a little type AA with the banks. And we're all with good intention to be at that leading edge, hopefully, for disability confidence and inclusion. So we can move the needle when there can be a lot of competing priorities, both for leaders' time and dollars. So that'd be one way. And I take a lot of time to reach out to different organizations. And that's actually how I've met some other people here that are part of the conference today overall, because I may hear something that's amazing that a company is doing, and frankly, I'll reach out on LinkedIn. how are you doing this? This is great, because the PWD population is still more hidden by comparison to other areas of diversity and areas of focus. It's definitely changing. I'm seeing this title shift over the last 18 months. But if we can have more people sharing their collective strategies, I think we all move forward faster.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thanks so much, Jennifer. Tammy, Bert, or Mark, would you like to participate in an answer to the first question? Oh, Tammy, I see you're off mute.
But yeah, no, I'm happy to share. I think there are some larger initiatives that EY is involved in 2019, right? We joined the Valuable 500, the global campaign for companies to accelerate progress on disability inclusion, and then stepped that up this year with the 13 iconic leaders through the Valuable 500. So on a global scale, but I think in line, right, with what Jennifer was saying, was talking to other people and sharing stories, and that across big banks, and I think that also includes across what we call the big four, right, in consulting and firms. So we and then open up anything that we're doing. So through COVID, of course, we've offered a lot of mental health webcasts, and we've invited to other companies, HR folks to join in, anybody who's interested, who may not, have the time as everybody's reacting in small and medium businesses to COVID and all of the changes that they had to make to be able to put those things on themselves. And again, I think just sort of share those stories. There are things, organizations like the President's Group in BC or others that are helping to promote as well, that we participate in any network really that we can.
Yeah. Excellent. That's great. And I know that speaking to, webcasts and webinars are as a way of, communicating what you're doing in broadcasting that. I was going to look over to Mark, because I know that Electricity Human Resources Canada also does that for, their members in the sector. Mark, did you want to chime in here as well?
We actually, so we're sort of a unique organization in that at the table, we have employers, unions, post-secondary institutions, and policymakers around our board table and our membership. Now, the employers, of course, lead the demand side, so we do spend a lot of time speaking with them. But one of the nice things about bringing that group together is we're able to talk about some of the tough issues with all of the right stakeholders around the table to try and come to some resolution on what some of the issues are. So certainly the board table is part of that, and that's where a number of our resources and tools have come and initiatives that we've taken on over the course of the past number of years. But the other thing that we do proactively, to your point, Megan, is webinars where we seek the experts out, people who have done good stuff and that they'd like to share it with our industry. And also, we've started up again a series of regional roundtables where we will bring not just employers, sorry, the full stakeholder group together regionally. Because what we have found is, Canada is a big country, and there are some unique things that occur on a regional basis, whether you're in BC, Alberta, or in Atlantic Canada, for example. Plus, they all just like to network with each other, which is always nice too. But there have been some really fascinating discussions around those roundtables around inclusive work practices and specific to disability as well. So the roundtables is a big piece. So just the knowledge sharing that occurs there. And one of the things that we do in those roundtables, to Jen's point earlier, is nothing is recorded so that everyone can speak freely. And it's important to do that because everybody feels safe in that space talking about the things that also haven't worked, so that others don't make those same mistakes in the past, and then everyone can move forward together on what does work or what could work. And so we've had some really awesome discussions at those roundtables, and we do those regionally twice a year. And so that's been a really useful way to talk about some of the tough issues that are facing the industry. And then, of course, the webinars, as I'd mentioned. One of the things we are exploring, we haven't done it yet, is an online version of that. But we're trying to tackle the retaining the nothing is recorded so everybody can speak safely space, while also providing an online version of that roundtable. But we haven't fully mapped out what that's going to look like just yet, but hope to do so over the course of the next year.
That's amazing. And I feel like you're reading my mind, because that's something that, CCRW is engaged in as well. Love to be at one of your roundtables. But I appreciate how you spoke to, the importance of how those sessions feel, that safe environment, the ability to be, open and candid about experiences and journeys, and to share that. We've hosted business leaders roundtables that I think, our goal was to have that feeling, and we've been lucky enough to partner with TD on one of those just before COVID. So we got to do it in person. We got to see the innovation lab at TD, and that was part of the sharing that we experienced. And I think, that feeling that we're all looking for is that virtual couch. How can we recreate that in a sense that we feel comfortable together, and we feel confident that what we're talking about in terms of our journey of disability confidence it's in a respectful place to know that we're not all at the same place in our journey for disability confidence, and that's a place that we can share and learn and grow. And I think that part of that growth comes from sharing those promising practices. And Bert, you spoke so, eloquently about, the education piece and the internal communication. I know you've had people come in and look at that innovation lab and ask questions. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we move on?
Sure. We learned early on that sharing is a good thing. Much like Jen, we've made connections with our counterparts in other banks to share best practices, especially in the early days when we were starting out. Anyone that learned anything got really excited. The more you share, the more we all win. And so it became a very collaborative effort. We quickly realized there's other industries that could learn from what we've done. So we've actually expanded that group and we've included insurance and quite a few people in not so finance related areas, but sharing that there's nothing we do that's secret. And in fact, that lab is something we've actually opened up. So we brought in groups like we did pre-COVID. We brought all our competitors in. They've all seen the lab. They've all kind of toured it. And interesting, when we started working with vendors on making technology accessible that we use for our customers and our employees, a lot of the vendors wanted to come in and see what we were doing as well. And we found that they'd get excited by it. And what may have started as a difficult conversation with a vendor that didn't have an accessible product, after we worked with them, helped them level up on accessibility, they're now out promoting their product as an accessible option. So it's a strategic differentiator for them to sell their product now. So it's great to see, and that just builds momentum. So again, the more we share, the better. Mark made a great point about having a safe place to have tough conversations, and we're having the same thing. So it's tough to do that online. So much like Mark, we're trying to come up with ways we can continue these conversations, but it's been a challenge, and I miss the lab. It'd be nice to be able to get back in the lab and bring people in again.
Awesome, absolutely. And an important point about the vendors piece. I mean, when we talk about accessibility in terms of what we provide, it's an expectation that we need to have around procurement too, and what we're buying and providing, the expectations we have on those companies where we're, accessing, those pieces of technology. So thank you for bringing that up. I know we want to get to the Q&A. and I'm going to do one more question because I know we've got a little bit of time, and I'll give each panelist kind of like that 60-second mark to answer. It wouldn't be a panel in in this lifetime that we're currently in if I didn't ask a question that was related to COVID. I know. But really, how has COVID-19 and I guess more importantly right now, COVID-19 recovery, so returning to the workplace, flexible working models, and talent retention, how has that impacted strategic initiatives related to disability and accessibility at your business, at your organization? Tammy, would you like to start here?
Sure. So, I mean, at actually DY, the conversation about mental health had really already been a focus. but obviously ramped up quite a bit through COVID for everybody at the firm. Our NCOE talent team, we launched actually at the beginning of COVID. So as a test case, I think sometimes it's valuable to learn right from obviously normalizing the accommodations and the flexibility of the workforce that everybody, now that the masses, of course, were demanding, that everybody has benefited from, but particularly some of our individuals. So it was an interesting, I guess, mini science experiment. So in our US offices where we had teams of neurodivergent folks had a sudden and abrupt change from a 5 days a week in the office to a remote. And while they were, concerned, it impacted a lot, particularly for individuals who had relocated for a job. And it affected, right, routine, social network, fun, and even food. People were concerned whether they were even eating healthy. For us, we have seen, of course, many of the benefits, but we're prepared for that. So I think all the front loading and preparation of knowing that really comes to tell us. And we have individuals who have many valid reasons why working remotely is the best situation for them. And, love to share, stories of what those are so that employers really understand what that means to them.
Excellent. And I'll pop it over to Mark.
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of lessons learned. As Tammy mentioned, just the ability to work from home and be as productive is certainly something that, our industry is a little odd in that, about 40% of the workforce works in the office, but the balance are actually out in the field. So those field workers never stopped going to the field. Like what they did changed, but as far as health and safety practices goes, but they were still out in the field. But anyone who was working in the office obviously was immediately pivoted to work from home, with certain operational exceptions, such as, power station operators who you don't really want to be working from their basement to control the power grid. So they were going into the office, but that's a story for another day. But all that to say, I think there's been a lot of lessons learned there about what accommodation can and should look like in one respect. The other thing that was really interesting for us too, as we've been watching this workforce over the past 2 years, we've seen acceleration in retirement of existing workers in certain areas. But we've also seen deferred retirement from other areas. And I think some of that is driven by, I don't want to be, on the one side, it's driven by, I don't want to have to deal with COVID restrictions and I'm only a year away anyway, so I'm just going to retire early. But then on the other hand, there are some people that are a little more worried about the economy. And so what might happen as a result of inflation continuing or whatever it happens to be, and then they'd be on a fixed income pension after that. So they want to stick around a little longer to just wait and see. And so they're doing that. So I don't yet know if that has balanced out, but what I can tell you is this workforce is retiring at twice the national average before COVID hit. And so we know that they need to fill roles fast. We also know that as a result of decarbonization policy, net zero emissions policy, that this is a workforce that's going to be in growth mode probably for the next decade. And currently, Canada is tooled not for that workforce. We're tooled for replacement only as far as skills training goes. And so I had mentioned earlier when I was talking about the importance of employers being in a bit of a pinch. They have to be more innovative in who they look at and how they recruit. And I think that one of the pools of candidates that they are increasingly going to be turning to is persons with a disability, and using some of the lessons that they've learned over the course of COVID to apply them with that cohort as they recruit over the course of the next little while. I know you said 60 seconds, and I'm sorry.
That's okay, because I could listen to you talk about that for hours. You know that that's your jam, and I couldn't have said it better myself. So thank you very much for providing that context for us. I'll pop it over to Bert and Jen if you'd like to provide an answer to that collectively, separately. I see Bert's off mute, and then I see some questions coming in the chat, so we'll get to that as well. Go ahead, Bert.
Sure, happy to. And Jen, jump in any place I forget anything good. Well, one thing we found out very quickly was we're pretty good at making assistive technology work at home. We had to do it overnight, so it was a rough couple of weeks when everyone was sent home. My team got really good at working with people's friends, family, children, plugging in cables, hooking things up, installing software. It was a pretty amazing time. So we're now working on our strategy on how we're going to bring those people back. You know, and a lot of these folks, their offices were moved while they were away. We've seen a lot of real estate changes, and I'm sure a lot of that assistive technology has gone missing. So we're ramping up. We're trying to pre-stock a whole lot of equipment so that when people come back, we're probably gonna have more of a hybrid working model. So they'll be working from home some of the time. They'll be working in the office some of the time. So we're probably gonna have to have duplicate sets of technology for them. So that's a big learning. The other big thing we learned is some people with disabilities prefer to work at home. It saves them the commute. It saves them, you know, the headaches of, you know, getting in an elevator, you know, making that transition into the workplace. Getting access to, you know, paratransit is not simple, not easy, often impacts their schedule badly. And so this is a huge benefit for them. We're also finding there's an awful lot of people that their social network is in the office, and they're really struggling. Mental health is a big challenge. And so we really need to make sure that we're, as we move into the hybrid working model, we're sensitive to the fact that some people will want to work, you know, full-time from home. Other people want to work full-time in the office, and many will be somewhere in between. And that's, you know, a lot of assumptions were made early on, but as we dig deeper into this, it's fascinating to see how you know, there's diversity of opinion and needs out there, and we just need to meet those.
Yeah. If I can jump in, you're absolutely right. COVID-19 sending us all home, well, many of us home. We still have a lot of people working in branches, and I want to respect that because they've been pushing through all through this. It actually provided some unique opportunities because before, to get an accommodation to work from home more days or fully from home, it was difficult because it was never written anywhere, but it was kind of this idea that there was a link between attendance in the office and engagement in your job. And then therefore, by implication, your potential for moving into a new role because you showed up and you proved yourself and you had that opportunity to network with that person in the elevator bay. All of that was gone. And the people who were working from home more often were actually feeling like they were missing out on those in-person activities through no fault of their own, but it was their accommodation program or plan that separated them physically from these unnamed informal ways that we would talk about networking and connecting with other people. So COVID-19 in a way leveled it because now this is how we see each other. Little boxes on a screen, right? Hollywood squares, some people would call it Brady Bunch. You pick your name, tic-tac-toe. So what we found is when you can't rely on the informal thing, running into somebody to get coffee or in the elevator bay before or after the meeting to really have the point you want to say to the manager, which we shouldn't do. Now we had to be more intentional with the engagement. And the people who felt less involved actually felt as equally involved as everybody else. We also found that those who have, some physical disabilities, somebody who sits in a wheelchair is now, right now, it's not apparent. We're all at the same eye level. And there were some things that opened up with that were tremendous. So some of the things where you might unconsciously see somebody as different, even though you're trying not to judge, and some people do or not, whatever. Now you wouldn't know it if you met somebody for the first time here. It's just not apparent. So you get to meet the person and find out more about them. So you get the leveling of the playing field, but leaders also had to be more intentional because they couldn't rely on the informal. So that's when you heard about, like we had fun. We did a team building where we did scavenger hunts with people in their home. So go and have some fun there, or you get to be more personal, right? And I mean, a lot of us are being a lot more informal in what we're wearing, speaking of hoodies and track pants. But we're being more human too if the doorbell rings or the kids are talking or whatever. So we're being more human that way. And that's been helping. And the other part, if you've had people managers or leaders who might have been nervous to talk about mental health, for example, they were going through this too for the first time. So all of a sudden their patience, their understanding, their willingness to say, it's okay, you don't have to be on screen. We actually set it up that we have webcam free Wednesdays, period. And we also have under almost all of our signatures now, my workday not be the same as yours. Please do not feel to reply to this outside of your workday, something like that. But that kind of idea to be intentional about work-life balance, to accept the person for who they are, where they are as a human, so that they can still do great work, because this is hard. So I'm just thinking there was one other thing that's been happening for us for hiring. Last year it was quiet. We were all lifting and shifting and just trying to get through. But now we're in a growth pattern as well. And what I'm finding is that recruiters could be more selective because there was frankly so much supply of candidates for the demand of jobs or what was available. But right now we're growing at enough of a rate that people are saying it's okay. And I won't say you have to have every single thing on the job board, but have some. And we're finding more flexibility. So some people who may have resume gaps, they're getting more interviews. Some are more getting jobs. So we're finding those growth opportunities. All of this from something that none of us planned, but we're finding some good in. Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for engaging in this rich discussion with me and, for all of what you've shared. And now we get to move on to another really exciting part of our time together that I know we've all been looking forward to, and that is the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And so I'm going to read out the question and I'm just going to open it up to the floor and answer as you're comfortable. So our first question that we have, I often hear a lot about the wonderful advancements in inclusive practices around the application and hiring process, as well as the accommodations made for individuals with visible disabilities, which is to be commended. Thank you. I would like to hear more about what best practices you've used to support individuals with invisible disabilities to access and succeed in training opportunities, and what accommodations have contributed to individual success. And I'll open it up to our lovely panelists if they'd like to answer.
Could I jump in on this one just to start? So when I mentioned earlier that we've taken a more inclusive approach to the programs and things that we run at EHRC. So we're as an organization, we're actually fairly small. We're only 15 people, but I like to think we have an outsized impact on our industry, which is 107,000. And one of the things that we've started doing, so we work with a lot of funding from federal or provincial partners, and that funding often comes with strings attached. And some of the strings might be something like, we need you to fill work placements and they need to be full-time and they have to be only for post-secondary graduates and they have to be only for, or if it's a post-secondary type program, they have to be full-time registered in school. So one of the first things we typically do is push back on those types of policy requests, because one of the things that we identified fairly early on was that when we first implemented the program, we weren't seeing a lot of people with disabilities take part. And the reason underlying that was some of these requirements, these policy requirements, were actually exclusionary. So someone who maybe can't work full-time for one reason or another, or maybe they can't do a full-time post-secondary schedule for one reason or another. And so working with our policymakers, we were able to see those requirements relaxed. And as a result, we saw a big uptick in the number of participants that came from people with disabilities. And those were two very simple things. So no longer full-time employment requirement and no longer full-time study requirement and that's like simple type of stuff. We've done a number of other things too. Any program that we do has to be AODA compliant. So all of the materials we develop are what's the Web Content Accessibility Guideline 2.1 level AA compliant. I can't believe I got that right. But things like that, because, and again, to Jen's point earlier, just being intentional about everything that we do to be inclusive. That is so important, and recognizing that when you implement a program and you're seeing that there's a challenge for somebody accessing it, having a deep look at why they're not able to access it. That has been something that we've certainly done at EHRC, and in partnership with our members and with policymakers who fund a lot of the work that we do.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. Would anyone else like to provide additional answers to that question? Good. I'll move on to the next one because I know we've got a few coming in the chat here. So this is a question specifically for Mark, if you're ready for the mic again. So I said, I really like the angle EHRC takes on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's great to hear about improvement that your stakeholders have made over 2-year periods. Setting targets, measuring impacts, and having a plan is important. Can you speak more to the toolkit concept that includes case studies and how use of the toolkit connects to the improvements, impacts, and reaching those targets?
So I'm actually going to start with the first part of that question, because one of our leading initiatives that we have at EHRC, we have over 100 signatories now across Canada, and reflecting most of our big utilities in Canada, is the Leadership Accord on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And the reason is only the CEO or equivalent is allowed to sign it, which means you have immediate executive buy-in. And then secondly, it's that benchmarking, which happens within 30 days of signature. So they have to benchmark, where are we today? And as part of that benchmarking exercise, identify how they're going to improve. And so set concrete targets, but also identify programs, policies, procedures, initiatives that they want to implement themselves in order to get there. One of the things that we found really interesting as part of the feedback from that initiative is that CEOs and their executive teams think they're further along than they are. And they've got this really nice policy document that says that they're super inclusive, but as soon as they start doing the measurement and as soon as they start really digging into that policy document, they realize that it's a policy in name only. And there's no actual substance, if you will, to what's happening on the ground floor. And so their next question to us typically is, I don't know what to do. How do I improve? And so to the question about the toolkit, that's where the toolkits come in. So we've designed a series of policies, practices, procedures, and outlined them for employers in our industry for things for them to consider to improve DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, in their workforces, and take them and make them their own. The other part of that, and the part that I think that's really resonated with our sector, is that we've used case study examples from employers in the sector of things that have worked, so that they can take those examples and modify them and apply them to their own workforces. Because this sector is a little, as I was mentioning before, it's a little unique in that it is very physical. There are high health and safety requirements in a lot of the roles. And so there are some things that they really do need to learn from one another, and that they may not be able to learn certain lessons from other industries. And so it's very helpful for them to have one another to lean on. And so that was why we chose to use case studies specifically from this sector. And so that's what the toolkit was grounded in. Again, we're a small group, and so we can only help so much. And so what we do is we put the best practices together so that they can take them and use them. And then in 2 years' time, they come back and measure to say how they've improved. And so that has been our signature initiative for the last 4 to 6 years. It started out as a gender diversity only accord, and it morphed into broader diversity, equity, and inclusion. And disability inclusion was a key component, and of course a passion project for myself, given my sons, who I hope to be living in a much more inclusive world for their benefit by the time they both turn 18, that's for sure.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Mark. And additional information around some of those, the tools and resources can be found on your website, correct? Awesome.
Sorry, I was just trying to get off mute. Yes, absolutely. They can be found on our website. A really quick way to find it is just in Google, type EHRC Leadership Accord, and it will come up. It's the first hit. Awesome.
Thanks for sharing that. I just want to get in another question. We've got about 7 minutes left, so I think we'll be able to get to the majority of them. Are there best practices that encourage individuals with invisible disabilities and also episodic disabilities to feel comfortable disclosing so that they can contribute to the wonderful conversations you are having with employees around developing inclusive practices and policies? Jen, I see you've come off mute if you want to start with this one.
So, and I saw that question. It's a fantastic one. I want to take a really quick two-pronged approach with it. If you're, and I think that was from Sherry. Sherry, I wasn't sure in that one if you were talking about a colleague and how they approach the work, or people managers and how we're training them to make it a comfortable conversation. The one thing I would say, speaking of two colleagues who we work with at TD, both of whom have episodic disabilities, to be specific. Anyway, they both have episodic disabilities. One has been very candid. He has epilepsy, and I'm going to use the old term because my brain isn't thinking of the more current one, but he would have grand mal seizures. And he told a few key people on his team, and he basically just said, I'm good, but just in case you see this, this is what to do. So he came in as the expert and the partner and gave the strategies, because to Mark's point, some people managers are like, I don't know where to start. I have good intentions. I'm just lost. And so I would always say this to candidates as well. You're the expert on your solutions because you're the expert on your experience. So if you have ways that you would recommend how people can support you should something come up, great. The other person I know, she refuses to share with anybody because she thinks it will impact her potential for career improvement and career growth, which is unfortunate. I've worked with her. I felt very honored that she disclosed to me, but she's still not in a comfortable space to share it. So it really is your comfort level if you're the person experiencing this. But I heavily encourage any candidate I work with, go in with the solutions that you know work for you. And you can be the guide. I will always say partner with your people manager, because when it comes to the expertise, you outweigh them. Go for it. Be that person. People managers, ask the colleague, how can I best support? What are ways and strategies that work for you? Instead of just doing a Google search, because Dr. Google does not have all the right info. But then also reaching out with internal partners and seeing what's possible, and then go in with that growth mindset, just to say, I'm not going to get it right the first time. I'm here to help. How can I help? And we're going to take this one step at a time. I may screw up, but it's an area of growth. So let's keep working on this together, because I want to bring out the best of you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jen. Did anyone want to chime in, or are we can maybe sneak one more question in? We've got 3 minutes left, so I'll squeeze the last one in if everyone's okay with that. So what are you seeing in promotion rates for your employees with disabilities, and what would you share with others to share best practices? So Tammy or Bert, would you like to chime in on this one? Tammy, I see you're off mute.
Sure, no. Yeah, it's a great question. I think that the demand for talent, and Mark mentioned as well, when that tight talent, we're actually seeing more opportunities for management positions for individuals than we may have in the past. So we've seen some promotions. I think what we always need to look at in that space, is what are the strategies, right? So very transparently sharing what are the performance expectations. We share what does that performance assessment look like from day one, so that you know you're working towards. We have a peer mentor program, our EY Buddy program. So you have somebody sort of one rank above who's guiding you also through those conversations, which is really critical to that. But I think for our neurodivergent individuals, we really have a conversation that's evolving. So not everybody's, I think people tend to think of a traditional career track. And we know we have individuals who want to be the technical lead or the subject matter expert in a topic, but not necessarily be responsible for other people in a traditional management trajectory. So I think it's how do we work our way backwards, right, into that goal for what they want to be the go-to person. And I think also to look at the space, we are seeing people rise through the ranks. We also know that there's a space once people get into leadership positions where you feel maybe a little bit more comfortable and safe, right? So we know statistically there are many hundreds of invisible, non-visible disabilities throughout all of our companies that we're not aware of and aren't disclosed for many reasons. But to make sure we're assessing at all of those levels as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tammy. And I see the lovely Maureen Hahn has joined us, which means we probably have 30 seconds left. So before I pass it back to Maureen, I just want to thank you all so much and to tell you all to take care and enjoy the rest of the conference. Maureen, over to you.
Megan, and thank you so much for moderating an incredible panel. I was really looking forward to this panel. You did not disappoint. I writing down lots and lots of notes as highlights to share, and I think that the one thing that I really am going to walk away from this session with that it's reminded me of is that there are as many differences with businesses and employers that there are with individuals who have disabilities, right? We you know, we have to remember that. We have to remember that businesses are very, very diverse on their own. So I thank you so much for your time. To all of the people who have come today to watch this great panel, thank you very much. Take care, everybody.